What makes a villain? Releasing anything but Bloodborne on PC? Designing terrible enemies? Or maybe cursing an entire race for an eternity to preserve a false age you have started? Wait, I think I know. Not liking and watching the entire video. Well, this is Villains of Souls 2. I will talk about the villains I haven't talked about. As much as I want to be perfectly lore accurate, come on, there's no fun in that, so I will throw in a theory or two every now and then. After all, a little bit of misinformation never hurt anyone, right? Well, grab a snack and get ready, or even leave the video on your second monitor, however you prefer, but let's get started.
Thou art strong, human. Surely thine kind are more than pure dark.
The old gods of Anor Londo have always looked down upon mankind. After all, humans were so eager for corruption, their minds were so easily broken, and they only brought destruction and darkness. Maybe this was true, but there was one host of the dark set to drown the entire world. He came from a rather interesting bloodline. Aldrich was a descendant of the gods. Surely his blood wasn't as pure as the lords of Anor Londo. In his early life, Aldrich lived in luxury. He had his own place below the city of gods, away from all the danger outside world possessed. When he came of age, Aldrich became a cleric of the Way of the White. He was part of the most prestigious divine order of Lordran. He served the gods well and spread Gwyn's fate, but clerics were corrupt. They would chase earthly riches and pleasures, sacrifice their own without a second thought. Under the name of Gwyn, they could commit any treachery, and they would get away as long as they worked for the next age of fire. Over time, corrupt ideals of divine order got into Aldrich. He fell to the depraved pleasures he was exposed to, but Aldrich was different. As he fell deeper and deeper into depravation, he wanted more. Simple acts were no longer enough, he needed more. When he tasted human flesh for the first time, Aldrich took a path he could no longer return. He took pleasure from listening to the screams of his victims. Within the Way of White, no one could question him. No matter who he laid eyes on, he could imprison them by simply accusing them of heresy or corruption. At the height of his depravity, there was a strong influence of dark in the Boreal Valley. With the entire city controlled by a tyrant, Aldrich moved to the Cathedral of the Deep. Within the walls of the cathedral, as he consumed more and more, he also corrupted himself with the darkness within his victims. His body started deforming rapidly, and before the eyes of the clerics, he soon turned into an unholy monster of the darkness and corruption. But Way of the White wasn't pure either. They figured Aldrich was powerful enough to extend the Age of Fire. As the flames started fading, they required more sacrifices for Aldrich so that he could grow stronger and become a Lord of Cinder. Evangelists were sent all across the kingdom. Their duty was to convince human settlements and tell them that they had this holy cause. They were going to be purified from darkness, and they were going to offer their souls so that the champion of the cathedral could continue Gwyn's Age of Fire. Men, children, women, regardless of who they were, every single resident of these settlements were loaded onto carriers and sent to the cathedral to please Aldrich. With countless lives sacrificed to Aldrich, he was ready for his duty. Aldrich followed his ideals, and despite his depravity, he sacrificed himself to link the flame once more. A corrupted monster of the darkness became the foundations of the coming Age of Fire. By a miracle, Aldrich survived the process, or maybe clerics saved him just in time to preserve his body. Now blessed with the cinder of the first flame, he was there to rest and recover until the day he was required to prolong flames once more. Now, Gwyn's age was a minority among the ranks of deacons. They were all prepared for the coming dark Age of the Deep. Perfect opportunity for Aldrich was set when Prince Lothric refused to start the new Age of Fire. Now, with the Lothric refusing his duty, all Lords of Cinders could be resurrected to honor their oath. But they also refused. It seemed Gwyn's age wasn't significant to old Cinders anymore. Aldrich, with a powerful army under his command, marched to Anor Londo, defiled the city of gods, corrupted Gwyn's palace, and consumed the last remaining god of Anor Londo. With Gwyndelin consumed, Aldrich absorbed his memories. He was an unstoppable monster with the power and the mind of gods. He took over the city, and Gwyn's age was no more. Aldrich faced no resistance. Silver Knights were unaware of the tragic end of Gwyn's lineage. Beast Watchers went hollow and they could no longer erase darkness from the surface of Earth. Apart from some minor undead bands, no one was in a state to challenge the Devourer of Gods anymore. Aldrich was unbeatable in a cursed world, no one opposed his coming age of the deep, but that was all until he encountered the Ashen One. Aldrich is a monstrous villain who enjoyed torturing innocents. His evil acts had no real intention behind them other than pure joy. Drangleic, with all its glory, was a mighty kingdom. Old gods still had influence on the land, but humans built and destroyed many kingdoms within Drangleic. Some lived in frozen wastelands and fought demons every single day of their life. Some peacefully lived deep underground, away from corruption and the god of light. And there was Wendrick, a mere human who managed to build a kingdom so powerful and advanced that it became humanity's only hope against the undead curse. But not all kingdoms were found so easily. To the east there was a wasteland so hostile and poor nothing could grow. Sustaining life was impossible. Within the swamp right below Volcano, an insignificant lord lived. He had no standing army, no castles, no cities. Only reason he wasn't put to subjugation was the land he ruled. No other king had interest in his useless kingdom. But he was a man of ambition. He had no riches, he basically had nothing, but he dreamt of the day he would build a kingdom mightier than any other in Drangleic. Years passed and one day a strange warrior from across the sea arrived at Drangleic. Traveler achieved great feats in his land and wanted to start from beginning once again. So he moved to Drangleic to challenge himself. Among all the great kingdoms, he was interested in the weakest of all. Sir Alone moved to the swamp and met Iron King there. He swore he would help Iron King raise an army and build a kingdom that was going to challenge the entire continent. With the help of Sir Alone, Iron King moved capital of his kingdom to the heart of the volcano. Nothing could grow in his swamps, but he could use the volcano to obtain riches others couldn't. In short time, they achieved great industrial advancements. They built a castle of pure iron and steel within the volcano. Sir Alone trained well-disciplined, powerful army. Iron King held the biggest factories and smelters across the land. His army was well-trained and well-equipped. No hostile army could pass his swamp, and no army could siege a castle floating on lava. At the peak of his strength, Iron King's hedonism and hunger for power became more and more obvious. He wasn't the man Sir Alone thought he was. Sure, nothing could grow in these wastelands he called his kingdom, but underneath, his mountain was filled with riches no kingdom could match. Iron King dug so deep within his kingdom, which led to a catastrophic event that poisoned his already miserable lands. His greed led to almost completely destroying his population, but that was no problem for him. Civilian lives meant nothing to Iron King as long as he could obtain more resources for his army. Around that time, undead curse began to spread across Drangleic, but Iron King had no mercy for those afflicted. He ordered anyone who caught the undead curse to be brutally executed. Within his kingdom, he hosted many brutal manhunt, but he wasn't doing this to slow down undead curse. He wasn't executing men as a last resort against the undead curse. He enjoyed the power and he enjoyed the hunting. He started imprisoning his own people in the huntsman coves. There he practiced necromancy and he trained the executioner's chariot. Within the halls of undead purgatory, beasts would never get tired, always hungry for more blood. With the spells of Iron King's personal necromancers, undead would be resurrected over and over again just to get trampled by executioner's chariot. Iron King was an unestablished lord who rose to power with outside help, and used his powers to bring pain and destruction to those under his subjugation. His kingdom and he were eventually drowned in lava, but that was long after he poisoned most of his kingdom and slain most of his people just for the sake of it. Miquella was the kindest of the demigods. Being the child of Marika and Radagon, he was born with great potential, but just like his twin Malenia, he was also cursed upon birth. But compared to his sister, Miquella's eternal youth seemed like a blessing rather than a curse. Twins, just like their mother, were Empyreans destined to become gods and goddesses one day. At a young age, Michaela's unmatched skills started showing themselves. He possessed great potential. He created and gifted many powerful incantations to Golden Order and those around him. Even though twins were equals, all the eyes were always on Michaela. It was rather strange that not a single soul in the capital city seemed to dislike him. In their early years, Malenia became a swordmaster feared and respected by the entirety of Lands Between. Michaela, on the other hand, was skilled in crafting new incantations, but he never truly showed his powers as an Empyrean. He didn't hide his true colors to be humble, but his powers were rather sinister. Michaela lived his life like a saint. He built Halictree from scratch and accepted all the abandoned souls of Lands Between. He tried slowing down and curing his twin sister's curse. He even risked his life to bring Godwyn back to life. In the end, Halictree was abandoned, Malenia's curse was never cured, and Godwyn stayed dead. Every good deed Michaela dedicated himself to was eventually abandoned by him. Michaela carried the characteristics of his mother, unlike Malenia. Right from the start, every good he did was motivated by his selfish goals. He used others as stepping stones to reach his one true purpose, becoming a god before Marika can ascend again. During Shattering, every demigod fought to become the next Elden Lord, but it was different for Michaela. He had no interest in a simple title when he could replace the gods, so he studied his mother's ascension in Lands Between. Marika held the puppet strings of strongest beings in Lands Between. Her half-brother Malekith was a loyal guard, and Godfrey, the strongest of the human race, was her consort. Just like his mother, Michaela aimed to gather the strongest warriors under his banner. Malenia, strongest sword master of the land, was already suspiciously loyal to him, and if he could take General Radahn as his consort, there would be no one left strong enough to challenge him. So, during the peak of Shattering, Michaela ordered Malenia to march Caelid and bring Radahn to heel. Two of the strongest armies of Lands Between clashed near Castle Redmane, and after a brutal battle, Malenia and Radahn were the only ones left standing. It all went according to plan. If Malenia could beat Radahn in a duel, a change in power projection in Lands Between was going to force Radahn to become Michaela's consort. But Michaela underestimated his twin sister. Malenia was dangerously loyal to Michaela, however she was still an Empyrean, destined to become a goddess one day. While Michaela was afflicted with a curse that was accepted as a blessing by all, it was the opposite for Malenia. Her curse revealed itself to be a blessing for her. Scarlet wrought within Malenia bloomed during her duel with Radahn. She was too powerful for a demigod to handle. Radahn faced a horrifying defeat. Malenia's wrath combined with Radahn's great rune burning his body made him lose his mind. Halictree was victorious, but Radahn no longer had his sanity. He was no longer useful for Michaela. So the second part of Michaela's plan started. There was no one else outside of his family as strong as Radahn, so Michaela needed a way to bring him back to life. At the time, Mohg was also planning his scheme. He had to convince an Empyrean to ascend as the god of his coming dynasty, but no one under Golden Order wanted an Omen as their ally, so Mohg infiltrated Halictree while their army and Malenia were still away. There he kidnapped Michaela to turn him into a god, but even before he could reach Mohgwyn Palace, Mohg was brainwashed by Michaela's powers. Just like everyone around Michaela, Mohg also turned into a puppet serving his master without self-control. A loyal knight of Mohg, Sir Ansbach, challenged Michaela to save his lord, but just like his master, he was also charmed by Michaela. Mohgwyn Palace was entirely under the control of Michaela now. Eventually, Tarnished arrived at the palace to help poor Michaela without knowing the truth behind it. Mohg was slain, but Michaela in his cocoon was unresponsive. After Tarnished left, Michaela used Mohg's body as a host for Radahn's soul. With his consort back, Michaela traveled to the Land of Shadows. If he reached the Gates of Divinity, he could replace Marika, and more importantly, he could rival the Outer Gods. He abandoned every single one of his humanly feelings, and he turned himself into a shell of his former self. Michaela, from start of his journey, always charmed and used those around him. He needed Malenia to weaken Radahn. He needed Tarnished to defeat Radahn, Mohg, and Mesmer. Without others, he was a weakling. His betrayal to his sister was going to trigger Malenia's third and final bloom, and if he became a true divinity, he would still have to face Marika, Malekith and Godfrey. Even if Miquella ascended to godhood, there were many powerful rivals waiting for him, but when he left his fear behind, he sealed his fate. At the gates of divinity, he was challenged by Tarnished, a godslayer who bested Malenia and Radahn. With his passion and fear, Miquella could face Tarnished, but as an empty shell, he was beaten by Tarnished moments before his ascension. Miquella the Kind is an interesting villain. He is willing to start wars where thousands will die and continents will be destroyed. He will brainwash and use anyone he can to reach his goals. Anyone who dares to get close to Miquella will become a puppet to forever serve him without escape. If Miquella avoided Tarnished and lived a longer life, he could have been the biggest villain of Lands Between, but that title belongs to someone else for now. Queen Marika is a villain created by tragedy. There are many villains made by different motivations, like the god of sunlight who wanted to build a better world but struggled to hold the power in his hands. His false ideals led to many disasters which in the end sealed the world in an unending cycle of curses. And then there's the Eternal Queen. Marika's life spans across countless ages, yet her motivations are never truly clear. Her story starts in a small village away from everything, where shamans lived a humble life. No earthly riches, no wars, no tragedies. But it didn't last. They were a small group of peaceful minority in a world of conquerors. Shamans soon caught the eye of Hornsent, a prideful civilization which is rapidly expanding across the Land of Shadows. Hornsent believed they were the chosen race above all others. It was their duty to spread their sacred religion across the worlds. Located at the gates of divinity, they were blessed by the Crucible. Their god wasn't a peaceful one. To Hornsent, there was no room for any other god. They started raising villages across the land one by one. They had their own way of purifying those who lacked the blessing of the Crucible. Hornsent eventually found the hidden shaman village. There was no resistance. Shamans were captured one by one. Marika was lucky to escape these raids, but her people were taken to various dungeons across the land to be purified. Hornsent rituals kept shamans alive as they were cut into pieces and stuffed into living jars. In life, they refused Crucible, so Hornsent gave them another chance by giving them a way to reborn as pure servants of Crucible. To Hornsent, living jars were holy entities. Marika returned to her village after Hornsent assault. She conjured a minor spell to heal his people under the warm light of her tree, but there was no one left. Marika was all alone in a world that wanted her death. Her sorrow turned into hatred. She sought allies to revenge her fallen race. Eventually, she gathered oppressed minorities in Land of Shadows. Whose banner under they gathered is unclear, but Marika had her first child, Mesmer, with an unknown powerful source there. Rallied under Marika and her firstborn Mesmer, they declared war on Hornsent. For the first time ever, brutal conquerors met a powerful force. Mesmer's armies were burning with flames of vengeance. They destroyed Hornsent defenses with ease. Battle was over and nothing could match Mesmer and his furnace golems on the battlefield. Mesmer recovered kidnapped shamans in hopes of restoring their bodies and their minds, but Marika was a different person now. Being alone in a hostile world changed her. She was no longer that peaceful shaman she once was. Her victory against Crucible opened her eyes. She could build a better world if she could rise as a divinity. She ordered Mesmer to burn down Hornsent and their entire civilization. She saw no mercy from Hornsent, and now she was going to bring destruction upon them. With Marika's orders, Mesmer burned down entire Hornsent villages, cities, temples, and castles one by one. They took no prisoners. Divine symbols of Hornsent and dancing lions were impaled one by one. Marika didn't stop after winning the war. Marika's rage was too much. She wanted to wipe out Hornsent for good. With the old divinity of Land of Shadows gone, Marika caught the interest of the Outer Gods. As a Numan Empyrean, she was ascended to godhood at the gates of divinity. In the process of her ascension, she was also cursed by one of the remaining Hornsent. Each of her children was going to carry a curse to stain her lineage. With her village and her enemies destroyed, she had no place in this land anymore. Just as she ascended to godhood, she decided this land staining of horn scent and crucibles wasn't worthy of her grace of gold. She abandoned her followers and her firstborn without a second thought. She was going to build her own kingdom in a new world. Without a trace, she left Land of Shadows. Marika's arrival at Lands Between was a well-timed event. Previous Elden Lord Placidus X was abandoned by its god. Without an Elden Lord under an Aether god's guidance, there was an opportunity for a new god to ascend. Many factions fought for the throne. Dragon Lord Placidus X was in a deep sleep. However, other ancient dragons were waiting for their day to bring destruction to humans. Primal tribesmen were gathering under a banner to take over the world, just like Glowmite Queen and the Giant. Every faction wanted Lands Between for themselves. Upon her arrival, Marika created the Earth Tree, but despite being an Empyrean in this new world, she was weak. She had no army, she had no followers. Eventually, she took Godfrey as her consort, and the legendary warrior's reputation was enough to gather a powerful army. Marika used Godfrey to defeat her enemies one by one, but there was a problem. Giant's Flame could harm and destroy the sacred tree, and Marika's solution to this threat was total genocide. She ordered Godfrey to slay the giant race in its entirety. Undefeated warriors fought a tough battle against their strongest enemy yet. Marika slain the giant's deity, but their flames wouldn't extinguish. As a solution, Marika left a single giant alive and cursed him to tend his flames for an eternity. To protect Earth Tree, she slain an entire race along with their god, but war in Lands Between was far from over. Marika was eternal, however even she wasn't immune to god-slaying destined death. Marika had to destroy another rival who could meet her powers. As long as Glowmite Queen lived, Rune of Death threatened Marika's godhood. Once again, Marika decided her rival had to be wiped out of Earth. This time she didn't give this task to her undefeated champion Godfrey. This time she ordered her strongest champion, her god and her half-brother Malekith to slay her enemy. Malekith faced Glowmite Queen in her prime. Against many godskins and the Rune of Death, Malekith managed to defeat Glowmite Queen. He claimed the Rune of Death and cleansed the Black Flame from its god-slaying powers. Lands Between was cleansed from two of the strongest rival factions, and Age of Peace started under the golden rays of Earth Tree. Marika and Godfrey had three offsprings, mighty demigod Godwyn the Golden and Omen twins Morgoth and Mohg. But twins were cursed due to their mother's treacheries in Land of Shadows. Marika couldn't look at her Omen children without seeing horn scents. She ordered all Omens to be caught and imprisoned within the sewers under the capital city. Golden Age was mostly peaceful. Godwyn befriended the dragons and Radagon allied with Liurnia. There wasn't a single power left in Lands Between to challenge Marika. But it wasn't enough for her. She had slain many deities, but the real gods in the depths of space were still holding the puppet strings of every living being within Lands Between. She had one last set of enemies to defeat. She had to ascend as true divinity and replace the Aether gods. When Godfrey's last crusade ended in decisive victory, she abandoned him along with his entire army. Marika stripped Godfrey of her grace and exiled the fearless warrior who served her for ages. They were all sent to brutal badlands beyond the mist to fight, to grow stronger and to die. She knew no army could survive badlands, but that is exactly what she wanted. She sent her most loyal soldiers to death so she could bring them all back to life stronger when she needed them. She secretly shattered Elden Ring, and as her punishment, gods imprisoned her within Earth Tree. But she had already planned everything. Her tarnished army beyond the mist was given guidance to return stronger than ever. Under Godfrey's banner, they were going to bring the order back to Lands Between. She was imprisoned behind the impenetrable thorns of Earth Tree, but the lone fire giant, cursed by Marika, kept the flame burning for this reason since the beginning. Godfrey was destined to face the giant race one last time and burn down Earth Tree to free Marika. With her flawless plan, she was finally going to replace the Aether gods and become the one true ruler of everything. Marika is a tragic villain who couldn't protect her people, and her rage slowly turned her into into a stone-hearted monster. She slain anyone opposed her, she abandoned those who she no longer needed, and she imprisoned anyone resembled her old enemies. But unlike all the other villains, based on the ending you pick, she is some of the rare evils to actually achieve her goals. Well, this is all for today, but there's an exciting news about Bloodborne. Apparently Bloodborne emulator is progressing incredibly fast, and soon I may be able to include Bloodborne characters in my videos. So let's see how it goes, but until then, this is all for now. So I will see you on the next one. Bye.